Hello everyone, my name is Reese Koszczynski. This is Simple Philosophy, where we simplify philosophers to help you better understand life. Now, I don't know how you're feeling about these videos, but I thought I'd do another random coffee break video. So here I am with my coffee. Got a cinnamon bun as well. And I just wanted to build off the previous video that I'd done on Mark Fisher, because a lot's happened in the political world over the past couple of weeks. And there were a couple of things that I think really highlighted Fisher's concept of capitalist realism and hauntology, which I thought might be a useful application of the things that we discussed in that video. Now, the first one comes from Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Zizek, who is, of course, rather popular. He's got his own followers, famous for his films, Pervert's Guide to Cinema, and then his books, Sublime Objective Ideology, and his most recent one, Hegel in a Wired Brain, which is a good one. It's a shorter read than I anticipated, but it's a good one. Now, in this op-ed for Russia Today, Trump is analysing the march on the Capitol that happened in America on the 6th of January in relation to Trump. And the article is called "Trump's Greatest Treason is the Betrayal of Populism." And in the article, he goes in to explain how Trump is merely just another member of the establishment who is using populist rhetoric in order to stir people on. But the most interesting part of the article for me comes from this section here, which is "Swamp Creature with a Populist Facade." And essentially what he argues is that despite the radicalism of Trump's supporters and people who support Trump and the politics that he's putting forward, Trump himself throughout his presidency has actually backed away from a lot of the things that would be more radical. And so as a result, it has ended up as business as usual. So one of the examples he uses to highlight this in the article is when Steve Bannon was thrown out of the White House, allegedly because Trump didn't like the tax plan Steve Bannon had put forward to increase taxes by 40% on the rich, which Zizek identifies as socialism for the rich. So even though there was an opportunity to do something radically different from the capitalist realist system that we have, Trump refused to. And then another section of the article, which I think is really interesting, is this phrase here. "That's why today's populists don't really want to get rid of the established representative democracy and fully take power. Without the fetters of the liberal order to struggle against, the new right would actually have to take some action. And this would render obvious the vacuity of their program." Now, for me, this is a really good example of capitalist realism. So in the video that I did on Fisher, we were mainly focusing on capitalist realism in the context of the left, really, and that conservatives have entered this dead end. But obviously with the rise of the new populism which has taken place on the right, they are as much susceptible to capitalist realism as the left are. So even though this group have stormed the Capitol in order to try and change the system, to make sure that Trump stays elected, to clean the swamp, and all of these other popular slogans, what Zizek is essentially arguing is that really all of that is a bravado. It's just a show. It's more of a performance than it is actually anything of substance. That really they realize that if they get rid of the system, then they'll have nothing to fight back against. So therefore their identity and their programs will fall into question because there is nothing beyond the show that they are performing. And I thought this was a really good example of capitalist realism in a modern context. Now, the other aspect of nostalgia or hauntology that had caught my eye in the past couple of days was Lana Del Rey, her new song, which is Chemtrails Over the Country Club. Now, full disclosure here, I am a huge Lana Del Rey fan. There was about, it must have been about 3 years where I just had Born to Die and Paradise playing in my car just on a loop because it was the only CD that I had in. I was meant to go see her last February, but obviously Corona, and I think her voice gave out, so she had to cancel the concert, unfortunately. But anyway, in relation to this new song, Chemtrails Over the Country Club, I thought there was some quite interesting elements of hauntology within that. So I strongly recommend you watch the video. But in the video, essentially, Lana displays the usual sense of privilege. It's got like a 1960s sense of privilege, which is a very kind of old vibe. The way she dressed, very vintage, even in the way it's shot, which again, very similar to what she's previously done. But it's this idea of displaying privilege through nostalgia, that she's looking at past privileges and an old elite and how they would represent their privilege as opposed to something that is contemporary. And it's almost like a nostalgia for that past that has disappeared. It's a nostalgia for the 1960s, that idea of like an open future where even people in the upper echelons of society were hoping to were kind of grasping hold of these different types of futures. There's also a kind of melancholia that underlines the track, and that's nothing new for Lana. But I think what it is new in terms of this melancholia on this track is the fact that it's more of a melancholia for like an empty void. And in the lyrics, there's a line that says, "It's beautiful LSD, normality settles down over me," which it kind of suggests that we're taking drugs, or there's this melancholia for something that we can't quite explain, for like some level of loss that isn't quite articulated. And I think if we contrast that with the imagery of the 1960s, it almost seems like a melancholia for a lost future in that particular sense. Finally, the last aspect of capitalist realism as a modern example that had caught my eye was, of course, the great Sleaford Mods. I'm very much looking forward to their new album. I'm a big fan of the Sleaford Mods. But in this review by the NME, of their new album Spare Ribs, it kind of highlights how Williamson is putting forward the arguments of an anger relating to everyday monotony, whilst also accepting that the frustration that there is very little that we feel we can do about this situation, particularly if you contrast that to someone like Idols, who are saying, "Oh, let's get together, let's fight the system." Williamson is saying, well, you know, everything's awful, everything's terrible, but there's not really an alternative to move from, because everyone's just trapped in this monotony. And it's this line here written in the review: "While rooted in the everyday fury of monotony of what we've all had to endure, there's a lot more light and variety on here than anything the Nottingham duo has ever put out on tape before." So whilst musically we can see that Sleaford Mods are excellently pushing boundaries on their technically 11th album, is this idea that underlines their music, or the genius of Williamson's lyrics about living in a capitalist realist society. And I would strongly recommend Sleaford Mods as an extension to what Fisher says. So there you go. So did you enjoy these types of videos? Are these useful in any way? Let me know what you think about the thoughts in the comments box below, and I will see you in the next video.